folks, it's Jo Muir here. Quantum Change Alchemist has that for a new title. I love playing with words. Not that they particularly mean anything, but I love the energy behind it because, yeah, well, I've been talking about witch stuff recently. That witch word, it's just been coming up for me more and more. I associate it with old energy. And as much as I respect the fact that I am a witch, and I have been a witch many times in previous lives, it can cause some association in this modern world. And what I resonate more with is the alchemist, and it's being revealed to me more and more. And just a quick aside from the subject in hand today, what I heard on the other day, and what it makes so much sense for me when I talk about being a parallel soul. So I've got 70-80% of my soul realms in parallel universes, multi-universes. Part of those is in the 13th dimension, which is the portal between the dark, all that is, and the light grid, and all the dimensions in this current universe. And it's in that multi-universe state that the alchemist plays. And I heard that, I went, yes, that's it. It's like, yes. I resonated with it so strongly. It was so powerful. So it's like, oh, now I know what to label my home. So, yeah, I am certainly adopting the alchemist, as I've known that I've been an alchemist for a long time. And yeah, I'm bringing that into my new involvement and branding and who I am, and that's all going to be evolving over the next 3 months, which is highly exciting. Anyway, let's get back to the subject in hand today. If you've been in this group a while, or even if you're brand new and you start having a look around at the group and some of the live streams that I've done, you will see new information that is simply not being shared amongst the masses right now. It's there's only a handful of people on this planet that understand this dark working and what that actually means, that are able to encode at that level as a dark worker. And the portal actually only opened for dark work 11th of May last year, so just over a year ago. And that's what I have heard. I actually feel it was open the year before, simply because of what I was channeling through with another dark worker. And yeah, without going into a story, I put all that aside until it was reignited this year. So look, again, let's not get hung up on dates and who can do what. It's just to say that. So okay, so let's answer the question: Why do we need this new level of work, dark working, and what does that mean? Human consciousness has been growing exponentially, if you like, through the Lightworkers, which are growing exponentially as we awaken. And Lightworkers, and I was absolute working in that stream for 5 years. I had defined myself as a light worker simply because I didn't understand the definition of the dark worker, and now I realise that's actually the alchemy that I was doing with people. The light workers are absolutely essential on the light grid in the universe because most of the human population is shut down, living very, very unconsciously. So when the light workers come in, they inspire others to open up their path of awakening and into possibility and into consciousness. And that's what the light workers do. Very valuable work. Been there, done it, done 16 years of that kind of work myself, and very valuable. What's happening now with the frequency of human consciousness, which is being replicated by the frequency of the Earth itself. If you think what's been happening to the Schumann resonance, which has been 7.83 hertz for millennia, is now suddenly massively increasing. It's an absolute indication of how everything needs to move forward. And it's almost like the human consciousness has got to the glass ceiling and is being limited by the light dimensions in which it's creating. And so the evolvement of consciousness required something that cannot be switched on and off like the light grid can. That's the thing. You know, one day, you know, before the sun was here, there was no universe. And when the sun came, everything was created in the universe, you know, fast forward a few million years, and one day the sun will die, right? It's still a light source. It can still be on and off. Whereas the darkness that lies behind is eternal. It's the all that is. It's the space of, you know, completeness of everything that is. And it's from the space of the dark that everything that has not previously existed emerges. okay? As I mentioned in a live stream the other day, we don't plant things in the light, we plant things in the dark, and that's where we are created from. So what I want to talk to you, I hope that's put it in this bit of perspective as why dark workers, dark consciousness is coming up now at this time over the last year. And it's the reason I'm going to Chicago, to be amongst, up to about 100 different dark workers, which is going to be just, imagine the energy in that room. We will be creating magic. And yeah, just immensely powerful stuff. So that gives you some background. So what I want to just go through and clarify, because all the work that I do turns everything that light workers or awakening people on the grid upside down, shatters the illusions of what we've been taught. So where we came out of unconsciousness into consciousness, and we were taught about, thoughts become things, and let's be the vibration, and let's move up the grid. That is all valid in the light grid, absolutely. When you are ready to move into the darkness, which only happens when you have shadow mastery on the light grid, and I'll explain that in a minute, then what you learnt on the light grid becomes irrelevant, and you see it for the illusion it is. Okay, so it's the next stage of involvement. So on the light grid right now, this is the stage of human consciousness. As I've explained, 90% of the population is unconscious, come into the light grid, become conscious. Human consciousness is where it is. So this is to do with your chakra system and truth as it's understood by the humans in this level of consciousness. And when we went across the tipping point of 200 between unconscious and conscious, as defined by Stephen Hawking in his books Power versus Force, which I've raved about for years. So 200 is the tipping point. About 10-15 years ago, the average was 213, and now it's, I haven't actually checked anything on 230, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 20, 219 right now. So it's going up. And so now we need the next stage of consciousness to exponentially grow that. So on the scale of 0 to 1,000, 0 to 200 is negative, forceful, egoic, from the mind. Over 200, you're starting moving up in the scale of how you're feeling. 500 is the tipping point to love or above. And, as we go through that, there's only fewer and fewer people up at that level. And so that's been the basis for my work for many years, and because I understand that to be the truth and the calibration of 0 to 1,000 in the universal light grid. And of course, once we go beyond the dimensions, I see that as going from up into 5D. I did a live stream the other day in another group on the dimensions, so I might well do that in here as well, if you'd like that, on understanding each of the dimensions between 0 and 14 and what each one of them is. So when I look at the frequencies and I calibrate the frequencies of each of the dimensions, 0 to 1,000 is 0 to 5D. So on the light grid, everybody's saying, let's get out of 3D and move into the 5D. And nobody's questioned, well, what happened to the 4D? What does that actually mean? Do we just forget that? Do we just jump over it? Do we not have to go through it? How do we avoid the 4D and what is in the 4D? And so we've moved from being the herd mentality in the unconscious level, where everybody watches the news and follows the politicians and follows the drug companies and follows all of that, and lives very materialistically and lives vicariously through their children with no life of their own, and absolutely from that place of just I have to do, and that's the purpose of life, into awakening, into consciousness, into the 5D. And that's been the catchphrase for the Lightworkers for the last 10 years or so. Again, it is valid if that's where you're at. And yet so many Lightworkers continue to do these courses and this healing and this training and this reading and this self-development, and this is to be more, and this is this eternal search for the answer, and it's like, oh, I think I've got it. Oh no, I'm still kind of going back to the same thing. And it's the hamster wheel of the Lightworkers, and I know that one very, very well. I know that space absolutely well, to the point of, if I don't get off this fucking hamster wheel soon, I'm not going to be on this planet at all. And I parked my healing business to go off and make my scarves, whilst I did more of my own work. And only this year have I discovered this dark work, and it's just like I can't tell you how strongly it resonates for me, because it's the truth, and it's like all that I've ever known, and denied my own power about it. And yeah, to find somebody else talking about it, it's like, yeah, this is what it's about. So that's where we're going on the light grid. So going back to the 4D, what does this mean? The fourth dimension is a level of energy. You could describe it as the underworld, the underground, the unspoken, the dark, as human consciousness defines it, because they don't understand it. And this is the energy I see is what comes through from the dark feminine energies, the goddesses, the underworld in terms of the fairies and the the shaman work at the fourth dimension. And there's 30 levels of dark to light in that. And it's almost like that's what you have to go through that level of darkness in this reality on Earth to experience what it is to come out the other side. And because people don't understand it, are scared of it, scared of the dark, literally, is made as bad and evil. And that applies to the 4D, and that also applies to the eternalness of all that is beyond this universe, because people don't understand it, and it's how it's being demonized through on the light grid, because it's not on the light, therefore it's got to be dark and evil. It's where the monsters reside, it's where the dragons reside, and they're out to kill you. Actually, you are the monster. That's where it gets to, and that's a big statement to make, and something that you kind of have to put aside and park until you're ready to hear it and know the truth of that. So when you're on the light grid, this is where shadow happens. There's no big light coming in here, but I can, if I put my hand over here, I can see shadow on my face, right? And you can only see shadow in an existence of light, right? Shadow cannot exist in the dark. And shadow is a distorted light. It means it's not a pure light, and it comes from a block. Yeah? So the shadow is a distortion of the truth. It's an illusion. It's a fear and a block that you have, which is truly an illusion, placed in your mind and in your etheric bodies as a thought process or a belief or an energy you've held in your bodies. They're simply not true. And you've planted that through an experience, this lifetime or many previous lifetimes, back to your original soul wound. And it's a space of unconsciousness of what that shadow is. Now, the lovely light workers come along and they help identify what those blocks might be. And that's useful. And yet, very few actually, they might give you tools to manage it. And that's what we call shadow management. And again, it's useful. When you're coming from unconscious to conscious and stuff comes up and you're triggered every 5 minutes, and you're given these tools to manage how you feel about them so that it doesn't hurt you so much next time and all of that. What most light workers don't do is actually alchemize those energies so that they don't come up again. And that's what I've been doing for a number of years. That's what I do in my sessions one-on-one with clients, is that I alchemize those energies. And it's only when your thought processes are stronger than your desire to be free of them will those patterns come back, because you're so attached to the drama that you've created around it, and you make all these excuses that you can't get out of it, you don't know how to. I've had the healing didn't work. It's like, no, your mind is so attached that you will go through, you don't know who you are without those belief systems and stories, so you go back and create them again, even if the energetic imprint has gone out of your body from having that. Does that make sense? So light workers only deal with shadow management. It's not true shadow work. It's certainly not alchemizing the shadow. It's certainly not a process that you can learn to, once something comes up, you go through a process, through an alchemizing process, which is what I teach now in my one-on-one work, to literally just dissolve that so it just does not come up again, actually. And you learn to recognize each of those shadow traits, and we've talked about them. If it's your prostitute, your child, your victim, or your saboteur, what voice it is, how to recognise it, and how to shoot the shit out of it, basically. So, does that make sense, that that's your shadow? So, shadow is not the same as dark. All right? Darkness cannot be seen in the light, and yet it always exists. Shadow can be seen in the light. Right? So it is not the same. The only way you see complete darkness is to have no light. So how can that be your shadow? All right? So people are so afraid of the dark because they're not used to not being on the light grid. I was reading some teachings of Osho the other week, and it said, that one of the exercises to do is to sit in the absolute pitch black darkness for 10 minutes a day and just be in that space and surrender to it. Can you imagine how powerful that would be? Can you imagine if being somewhere so far off the light grid, literally, that there was nothing in the sky or any aspect of it, in a complete dark room? And how would that be for you? I would actually like that opportunity now. It would have scared the pants off me 6 months ago, but now I'm like, yeah, let me sit in a room. Let me sit in an absolute 100% darkened room and see what my mind does. That turns me on and makes me think, my God, how would that be? Way more than sitting in meditation for hours on end trying to still my mind, because it's still always on the light grid. Yeah? So let me know if that resonates. In the darkness, the truth is so incomprehensible because it exists, it's what is. It's like the lightest light. And that's the truth of the darkness. It's the lightest light. It's a frequency that can't be appreciated on the light grid. It's the raw material. And it's the space of the superconscious. So we've got the unconscious majority of the human population, the conscious population of our awakening folks are light workers. And then we go into superconsciousness, where we realize that we are the true creator. We are the God, the dragon, the monster, the all that is, that we can create something out of nothing. Manifestation is about bringing into your experience something that already exists. Oh, I want to have more money. I'd like to have that house. I want to have the partner. They're already on the light grid. You're just calling it in an energy, aligning it for it to bring in. Useful. And yet it's not creating something out of nothing, which is what I do, and it's what I help others do. So the superconsciousness are bringing that raw truth from the dark, alchemizing it through the dimensions, through the portals, and then bringing it onto the light grid into existence. So it's, where Steve Jobs would have pulled his ideas from, the creative genius that he was. He wasn't a human. Of course he wasn't. He was an amazing co-creator, and he pulled something out of nothing. Ford, the motor car, pulled something out of nothing. The internet, everything that never existed once and exists now came out of nothing. Yeah, and so when you get so aligned with going, oh my God, if I knew how to do this, I would be able to stop searching on the light grid. I'd be able to be a master of my energy on the light grid. So I know how to shadow alchemize every single time. And from that space, hey Sarah, and from that space, the next evolvement is into the darkness and co-creating from nothing. So look, so you just come in at the end, Sarah. You by all means go back and watch the beginning. I'm being explained the difference between light, shadow, and dark. And what else do I want to talk about? Yeah, the other thing that I'd like to talk about, hang on, celebrity, is many people on the light grid talk about, I need to be protected, I need to create a safe space, I need to set up the space, and then I need to clear it afterwards. And you know what happens when we do the energetic release? Where does it go? And does somebody else get it picked up? Real scared mentality. That you could be affected by someone else's stuff. You know, this is where the empaths get off on the light grid. It's one of my bugbears. It is nothing noble about being an empath. It's really not. Because you're deeming your own self-importance by feeling what somebody else feels. And that's fine if you do it. It's whether you take it on board or not and let it affect who you are. Because when you get to the point of understanding that no thing and no one has power over you, then whatever anybody else is projecting has nothing to do with you and is not in your remit to take on. Because your energetic boundaries are so in the space of being in place that you are simply not available for their shit. And yet, because the light workers don't understand how to have those boundaries properly in place or define them, they deem those as to be selfish and, how can I, the classic Mentarkan element that I've been raving on for the last 5 years. And hey, Darian, I want to have the boundaries down so I can be there for everybody, so I can feel everything, so I can be available to everybody, because when I'm freely available, then they'll love me and I'll feel of value, and all that stuff that's so on the light grid is unfunny. And it's screwing everybody over because you're so utterly exhausted being a people pleaser. And if you don't have people in your life, you see that there's no point because you can't serve yourself. You have no ability to serve yourself. Because unless you're helping someone else or doing this for somebody else and they're giving it back, you see no value in yourself, which is all about your own self-worth, self-boundaries. But you don't, when you get past the point of that and shedding that illusion, and your boundaries are in place, it's like you can listen to a friend and go, yeah, it's their stuff, it's completely their stuff, you're not taking it on. And when you do get to the point of moving into subconsciousness and you take that process, which, oh my God, does it take commitment? You will find that the majority of your friends disappear out your life anyway, because you're simply not going to put up with their shit. Because you just can't. You just can't. You're not going to be the sounding board anymore. You're not going to be the empath anymore. Your whole client base will change. And yet, because your energy is so defined, so aligned, so in your container, so waterproof tight, nothing can come in. You stand true to your values, your worth, you are in this creative space. You need no one, because you're off the human grid. You're off the light grid. You're off. Break free of that requirement of belonging, of community, of being needed, because it's an absolute human construct, because you do not know how to define yourself without having it reflected by someone else. Yeah? Get that? I mean, I didn't even know this stuff was going to come in today, but it's so true. You spend all your life, especially people with parallel aspects, you spent all your life going, fuck, if only somebody had given me the Earther's Manual when I came in and I knew how to understand these people, knew what it was that they wanted, could turn up how they liked me, and I could do what it was that make them happy, then I'd be happy and it would be okay. But because nobody gave me the manual, I can't figure it out, and I don't even feel like I belong on this planet. And I know, Sarah, you've got some parallel aspects in you, and I know many of my clients do. And certainly the work that I'm moving forward, they absolutely have one-on-one, because they're so lost. They're so going, oh my God, if I don't figure this out, if I don't get off the hamster wheel of the enlightenment path and find the solution, then I don't see the point of going on. Because you don't know how to fit in, you don't know how to belong, you don't know how to do all that. And when you understand those illusions and learn how to alchemize and step into your true power, you're so free from any of that. And you come back as your true genius, doing what you are absolutely gifted to do. It's almost beyond your gifts. Your gifts and abilities, again, are on the light grid because they have a value. Right? People pay you an amount that you deem. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation about value and worth of what your gifts and abilities are. and as we go through the path of awakening, you know how many broke spiritual workers there are, right? It's the story. And there's a few at the top end, and then we all have to deal with the jealousy about how can they charge that amount of money? How can they justify that? Well, it's nothing to do with them. It's completely to do with you and your self-reflection that you don't think you're worth spending $10,000 on or $20,000 on. Nothing to do with them. Nothing to do with their actual abilities. They are owning their stuff. It's you that isn't owning your stuff when you don't step in to the illusion that money is irrelevant to you not doing what you truly called for. Because when you get to that point of understanding it's life or death, literally, if I don't work out how to bring my gifts forward, there's no point me being here. That is a life or death conscious decision you are making, or you're considering. And then how much guilt you have going around in your head of how could I possibly do this and leave my children behind? Oh, but they'll be all right. They'll sort itself out, And yet, if your child was seriously ill in hospital, got run over, God forbid, you wouldn't question about, oh, well, no, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's worth getting an ambulance. I mean, perhaps he could walk, because I don't have the $600 for an ambulance. No, let's not bother with the hospital. I've got a friend she's quite handy with a needle. She can come and stitch him up. No, he's not worth it. You absolutely would not go through that process in the moment of your son's being hit by a bus. You would just call the ambulance. You would get to the hospital. Money wouldn't even come into it. He needed the best treatment in that moment to save his life. Right? You wouldn't even question it because you put so much value on his life as your child. Hey, Daniel, you put so much value on his life as your child. It's non-questionable, it's non-negotiable that you wouldn't take him to the hospital to get him fixed, right? Yeah? Oh, school notifications popping up on my phone. We don't question that. And yet when it comes to a decision of, well, is it worth me staying alive? Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm really worth it. I'm not really sure if I'm worth spending any money on, really, because I've got all this other responsibility. It's the same boat. If you think your son's life is worth saving when he's run over and hurt on the road, tell me how that is different to the insides and your heart so fundamentally breaking that the mask that you've been wearing feels so fucking heavy you don't know how to keep it on in place, and you are that close to just ditching the mask and just being out of here. To me, I regard that as a life or death situation. So I regard finding the money to invest in yourself to not only move out of survival mode, a mask carrying mode, into thriving mode. I'm talking about I don't even want to move incrementally up from survival to thrive. I want to go to ownership, to being the creator, to being the genius that I am. And that is what requires the trust in your intuition and doing whatever it takes, no matter what, to find your own life again, to find your own, goes beyond purpose. Because purpose, again, when you bring forward your gifts and abilities, has a value. When you go through that phase and you're coming back to the truth of who you are as your genius, you are actually creating yourself as a priceless work of art. Because at the end of the day, who deems what a piece of art is? You see these pictures of scribbles. I saw a picture of a scribble, and apparently it sold for 75 million, like the week after 9/11. Who deemed that piece of artwork was worth 75 million? Because it's priceless, basically. Yeah. So when you understand that you are a priceless work of art that has come from literally nothing in the darkness, then it's for you to answer that question: how do I get back there? So, gosh, I diverted off. Hey, there's so much information coming through these days. I hope that has given you some food for thought. Scares the pants off you, I get that. And that's why I love working with people one-on-one to take them through this process and just fast track. What's beyond fast tracking, it's quantum. I've been working the quantum for a long while when I realised, you know, what I alchemize in people, and yet when you do programs with me now, it's watch Belinda's testimonial from last week and see the shift for her in 2 sessions, and she's working with me for 3 months. I can't wait to see the end of the 3 months and what she's created. So yes, I've diverted, but yes, it's important for you to understand. So like for Belinda, she realised that it was like there was no choice. There was no choice. It wasn't a choice. It just had to be done. It had to be done in order to be able to stay on this planet alive. The work has to be done. That was her choice, her decision from intuition, not from her head, not from her heart, even from her heart, from higher guidance. And that's when you know, because you're not making a decision from your head at all. So look, a lot's been covered today. I hope that has clarified the difference between shadow work on the light grid and being in the dark, which is not evil or bad, and that is a complete man-made construct, only ever coming from the light grid. So nobody's left any comments. I hope that I haven't terrified you too much for a Monday morning. And thank you for joining me, for those that are here. And by all means, put some comments in below and feedback, and let me know how that has triggered you or otherwise, or where you're at with that. So until next time, ciao, ciao.